Okay, brilliant. We're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the show. And today I found an interesting article that I want to enlighten you all on. And this article was on the Athletic, which is a sports publication that's hidden behind a paywall. So if you didn't pay for it, you wouldn't know the greatness. You wouldn't have known this information. And the particular information that I'm going to be talking about today is clubs with very strict transfer policies. Now, obviously, when everyone thinks of this, right? Excuse me. Everyone thinks of Athletic Bilbao with their Basque-only players, but there's actually a number of clubs. There's four that I'm going to be talking about that also have very strict player recruitment policies. And in this show, hopefully, I'll enlighten you and let you know of all these teams all around the world that at least try to follow in Bilbao's shadow in terms of their strict recruitment policy. Okay, so the first club that we're going to talk about is Club Deportivo El Nacional. So I guess first of all, the first thing you do is when you look at them, when you look them up, like it's the name for a start, and then also the badge, which proudly bears the colours of the Ecuadorian flag. So this is kind of setting the expectations of what's going to come. So, and this is even before you arrive at the club's nickname. They're also known as Puros Criollos or Pure Natives, a reference to the club's policy of using only Ecuadorian players. So Nacional was formed in Quito, in Ecuador, obviously, in the early 1960s. The club was the brainchild of a retired military general and was created ostensibly as an army team. The idea, unavoidably, and so basically, the club was in line with the military, and it was to show. The aim almost was to showcase the best of what Ecuadorian football had to offer. And the project achieved immediate success. So they finished second in the Ecuadorian league in their first season in professional football, and then they won it 3 years later. By 1986, they had claimed nine titles, more than any other team, including which is the same or better than historic outfits such as Emelec and Barcelona de Guayaquil. And actually what was interesting about that is these were all won under foreign managers. The first was under Italian Vecilo Bertoli, and the last three were under Roberto Abusezi of Brazil. And as with Athletic Bilbao and other clubs in this article, strict rules regarding player recruitment tend not to apply when it comes to coaching staff. So I guess that's how they got away with it in that case. However, in recent times, Nacional have struggled. They've only won the league 4 times in the last 35 years, the most recent being in 2006. While they could for a time take comfort in the fact that they were developing plenty of young players for the national team, and several of them featured in the 2006 World Cup team, including Antonio Valencia, the picture now is less positive. With little quality in the squad, they were unfortunately relegated last year. And this decline is partly due to economics. The armed forces no longer have such a direct influence since the club's first open elections in 2013, and funding has dried up as a consequence. Poor management has been an issue, but the end of financial support has been a decisive factor, explains Marcelo Gallo, who is a journalist for the Ecuadorian newspaper El Universo. Understandably, there has been debate about the Ecuadorian rule, and over recent seasons, opinion has been divided, Gallo says. Some insist that having only Ecuadorian players is part of the club's identity, but the market for local footballers is very underwhelming in terms of quality and value. It would certainly not be easy for the directors at the club to abandon the rule. Even those without ties to the military have voiced support for the tradition. Signing foreign players? Not during my leadership, says Jorge Yunda, the first civilian president of the club. We must put faith in our youngsters, no matter what the cost. Although, in fairness, when Yunda was saying this, Nacional weren't playing in the second division, and this is kind of, I guess, is going to start a rethink. And Gallo, who we talked about previously, who's the journalist, said even supporters of other clubs are worried for the level of the league as a whole because El Nacional are considered one of the big teams in Ecuador. So obviously, them getting relegated doesn't really show that much is going well in Ecuador at the minute in terms of the players that they're producing. And personally, and this is we're going back to Gallo again. Personally, I believe that the club should take the plunge of foreign players. Economically, it's easier to sign a good player from another country than signing a top-level Ecuadorian player. If we're talking about our national team players or those who are already abroad, like it's going to be very unlikely that they're going to come back to the Ecuadorian league. However, it would be fair to say that like departing from this strategy of Ecuadorian only players for like which they've been doing for half a century would certainly be like, you know, someone would need a lot of guts in order to get that done. Everyone is aware of the responsibility and the weight for who would fall on making that decision. And so that's Nacional for you. And the next two examples don't quite follow the Nacional tradition, but they might be just a bit more intriguing. So, yeah, you'll see as the article goes on. So, we're going to be moving to Singapore next. But first, before we even go on and talk about the club, we have to talk about the actual Singaporean league in general, which I did. And this is all very interesting stuff that I didn't know. So, in 2003, right, there was very little interest in the Singaporean league, and in terms of like trying to stimulate interest in the league, Singapore's Football Association invited foreign teams to join the local league. Over the next decade, clubs with links to China, Sinchi FC, such as Sinchi FC, Liaoning Guan Yuan, Dalian Shide Siwu, and Beijing Guan Talent, and in South Korea, Super Reds, various African sporting nations such as Sporting Afrique, and then in Brunei, clubs from Brunei, who were represented by DPMFC, Malaysia, Harimau Muda, and even France, all sprang up. And their squads are mostly filled with players from the respective countries, with the odd Singaporean there to make up the numbers. And as of 2021, only one of these experimental clubs remain. Four-time winners, Albirex Niigata S, the S being for Singapore. An offshoot of the Japanese clubs, Niigata joined the league in 2004. Their idea was to give young players first-team experience after they left university. Amazingly, for 14 years, this team in the Singaporean Premier League only used Japanese players, which is really interesting. Perhaps recognizing the strangeness of that situation, the club married their on-field efforts to a social program that endeared them to their hosts. They're a very well-respected club in the Singaporean football sense, explains local journalist Kelvin Leong. Not just because of their commitment on the pitch, but also their community work. They really make a point of giving back to the local community. Admittedly, this attitude has also led to the relaxation of their recruitment policy. In 2018, Singaporean players Adam Swandi and Shahul Ryan joined the squad. Their objective was to help the local football scene develop, says Leong. So they have now brought new local players into the mix. If that technically disqualifies them from their list, what's the technicality or two between friends? The next case is definitely more. So I guess you can kind of discount Albirex Niigata off this list because they have two Singaporean players, but you know, it's still like a pretty interesting story considering the fact that it's only two players. It's not like in the Premier League where like a massive majority of the teams are made up of foreign players, like apart from Burnley or a couple of other clubs but like, you know, Burnley comes closest to mind. Next, we're off all the way to India and to Goa and the Indian Arrows. Let me just change the ticker. Brilliant. Okay, the Indian Arrows. So these guys are a second division professional team that employs only Indian players. Again, this is an irregular football club. They were formerly known as AIFFXI and then the Palian Arrows. And they were created in 2010 by the Indian FA to guarantee regular football for the country's best young players. Instead of warming the bench elsewhere, the boys, mainly plucked from India's under-17 and under-19 sides, would gain experience and continue to develop together. They even play in India's colours. The project only lasted 3 years initially, but was revived in 2017 after India hosted the Under-17 World Cup. And essentially how this club works is Football Association scouts find the best youngsters, most of whom don't have long contracts at their club, and relocate them to the Goa side. Success here is not judged in titles but in long-term impact, and results have been impressive. Many senior national team players and stars of the Indian Super League have come through the Arrows system. They know about systems and learn how to deal with the exposure, says a source who follows Indian football closely. They become a lot more confident. So it's actually really interesting. I would have known this if the Athletic hadn't covered it. So I guess it's good for the Athletic, I guess. So, however, there are critics for this. Some feel that the approach is too centralised, that investing in a core group of youngsters is all well and good, but that it doesn't contribute to a wider culture. Sensible critics see it as myopic, says the source. India must invest in developing a system that organically produces players. It doesn't make sense to put all your eggs in just one basket. One thing seems pretty clear though, however. As long as the Indian Arrows exist, there will be no diversion from the Indian-only policy. So that's really interesting there. And those were the weird examples. But when it comes to distinctive recruitment rules, the closest analogue to Bilbao, even closer than Nacional, who I mentioned before, is Mexico's CD Guadalajara. Now, obviously, we all know Guadalajara. Well, some of us know Guadalajara from programs such as Narcos Mexico, where obviously there's a big drugs trade in Guadalajara. But CD Guadalajara, or also known as Chivas, have their own kind of big name as well. So, since 1944, they have stuck with the policy of only using Mexican players, even as rivals have bolstered their squads with footballers from South America, the US, and beyond. And the club was created by French and Belgian students. Numerous foreigners wore their colours across 4 formative decades, but things changed when Chivas joined Mexican's professional league system. So their new president, who was a chocolate factory owner, Ignacio Lopez Hernandez, decided that Chivas should be governed by an underlying principle. He wanted the club to inspire national pride, much as the way as they do it in Bilbao, because, the people are educated in terms of, having pride in the Basque flag, and that you can certainly see parallels between Chivas and Bilbao here. And this team, what was his name? This team, the president said, will succeed or perish until the end upon the foundation of talent, upon the foundation and talent and efforts of 11 Mexican players. Now, there's no written code to this effect, nothing in the club's constitution, but Lopez Hernandez always referred to it simply as an acuerdo, or an agreement, between him and the other directors. At the outset, before the approach had been solidified into like a part of the club, essentially, there were ongoing debates over whether this was the right thing or not. So there was a time when two players, Primitivo Guilen and Ignacio Magana, tried to convince us to buy some foreign players. Lopez Hernandez said in an interview in 1988. They said that they would leave otherwise. That gave a lot of people cause for doubt. But we had a productive meeting and decided that we would not backtrack. Fortunately, the agreement still exists until this day. The players kept their promise and left the club. Skepticism from outside stiffened Chivas' resolve. This is it. There is a remarkable newspaper advert, which is sadly undated, but reserved in a book which the club used to mark the club's 75th anniversary in 1981, in which Lopez Hernandez's successors map out their vision in more detail and stick a middle finger up to the doubters. They gave us 6 months to live, and certain people have invited us to give up on our convictions. It reads, "Those were bitter days when things were against us and criticisms piled up, but we never lost hope. The failures spur us on. We will never falter." Another section anticipates and glosses over a nagging unease, rarely voiced these days, about the exclusionary nature of these type of rules. There is no aversion to foreigners. On the contrary, Guadalajara professes admiration for players born in other countries who have sown the football seed in Mexican soil. Then there is a call to arms in the advert, which chimes with the kind of feelings so often invoked in Bilbao. The biggest satisfaction has come from giving our footballers opportunities to convince people that they can stand toe-to-toe with the best players from other countries. It reads, Guadalajara's policy has permitted youngsters from humble backgrounds to make headlines in the sports pages. And today, football in our country is feeling the benefits of the romantic idea that animates and continues to animate the Guadalajara directors. It is an idea expressed in their motto, unbreakable faith in Mexico and Mexicans. And decades later, this sentiment still hits home with many people who are interested in Guadalajara. It gives the club a special identity that the fans love, says Juan Manuel Figueroa, who covers the club for website Medio Tempo. They relish the idea that the club is unique in the Mexican game. It's historic. It is impossible to explain the club's popularity without any great certainty, but it seems uncontroversial that to say that Chivas are Mexico's best loved club through a combination of two factors, which is the tradition of playing only Mexican players, and the other was the stunning sequence of 8 league titles which occurred between 1956 and 1970. That team, which was known as El Campeonísimo, firmly embedded Chivas into the shared imagination of the Mexican people. So today it is estimated that over 40% of Mexicans support Chivas. This is a blessing and a testament to the feelings that the club inspires, but it also brings pressure in its own right. So too that the fact that in the last 50 years has just wielded 4 more league titles. And it is easy to profess imagination for a brave, anachronistic policy during the good times, but the true test really comes when they're going through bad times. And several issues interconnect here. The first is that foreigners have become increasingly influential in the Mexican League, and most clubs have the financial clout to pluck talented players from South America, and even Europe. And an example of this is Tigres, who played in the Club World Cup final yesterday, large in part to the brilliance of the French striker André-Pierre Gignac. 1 second. André-Pierre Gignac, who I think he was in France's World Cup squad, if I remember correctly, or maybe their Euros team. But certainly he's been influential, to say the least. And it's fair to say that most of Chivas' rivals have been boasted to some degree. To compete, Chivas have had to develop their own players and buy from their competition. The latter is not as easy as it sounds. Firstly, the best Mexican players head to Europe or the MLS, and the second, because rival clubs know that Chivas don't have the strongest bargaining position. Because they don't have the strongest bargaining position. Some managers of other clubs have openly admitted that they have set one price for Chivas and a lower price for other clubs, says Jose Maria Garrido, who covers Chivas for Claro Sports, the TV channel in Mexico. And that has always been the case, and it will continue. So the frustration was expressed by then coach Jose Cardozo in 2019. Club America signed big players. Tigres, Monterrey, and Toluca sign 8 or 9 more foreigners every year. Chivas have at best a very limited market. This isn't to make excuses, it is the reality. These days you cannot bring the best Mexican players around, frankly, because they're too expensive. However, I guess the good thing for Chivas is their academy has often helped them out a lot. So players such as Carlos Salcedo, Miguel Ponce, Javier Hernandez, and Carlos Vela, the last two probably are the most the biggest graduates of the academy in recent times. And I believe that the club should never buy anyone, Mexican poet Daniel Sada once wrote. All of the players should come from the academy. That is the Guadalajara that I want to see, one with genuine passion and real roots. There are some, though, who believe that the increased competition has rubbed at the corners of the Mexican-only policy. So you have people such as Gerardo Mascherano, who was shown the exit after he was, he was found that he was actually born in Maryland, which obviously would mean that under Guadalajara's policy that he wouldn't be able to play. And Mascherano was so annoyed that he even considered suing Guadalajara for discrimination. But this is kind of changed. But Chivas have understood, and they've actually signed multiple US-born players, including fan favourites Ponce and Isaac Brizuela. The club has been happy to sign players who have represented the US at youth level, provided they renounce their international allegiances. A debate to rage about these cases. Rumors of a move for Hercules Gomez, a Mexican citizen, by a US international, proved deeply controversial, as did an intervention by Johan Cruyff during a brief spell as Guadalajara's technical advisor in 2012. Cruyff professed to love the club's philosophy, but suggested the rules should be bent to allow naturalized Mexican citizens, such as Brazilian-born Sinha, to join. If you're Mexican and you have the talent, you can play for Chivas, no matter where you were born, Cruyff suggested. This claim did not sit well with the club's then president, Jorge Vergara. And while tensions involving the intricacies of citizenship and identity are unlikely to go away anytime soon, there remains a fundamental commitment to the Mexican-only policy, both by the fans and in the boardroom. And today, Chivas are run by Vergara's son, Ameri, who insisted that nothing will change on his watch. To abandon the rule would take a very big part away of what Chivas are and the great tradition that we have maintained for so long. I think about how people gave everything for this tradition, which at times has been difficult to maintain. People said it was crazy, but because it was hard, it makes us harder to be competitive and achieve our goals. But the club has remained firm. Something extraordinary would have to happen for us to contemplate moving it. And others have backed them up on this, saying that they don't. The sporting director, Marcelo Michel Leano, backed it up, saying, "I don't see it as a disadvantage. On the contrary, I believe it's one of our main strengths as a club. This tradition allows us to show how Mexicans play the game and how it's really important to us. We feel we represent the country, essentially. And at Chivas, we have never even had naturalized players like the national team house. So we can say that Chivas is the most Mexican, even more Mexican than the Mexico team." And that's really a really interesting point, and I guess it's very contentious in that way. But certainly, all of these four clubs are very interesting examples of the spin on trying to on their transfer policies, I guess. And it's really interesting now because before this, I only thought that Bilbao were the only team that conducted the policy of having only players from a specific region or a place in the world. But Certainly throughout the show, I've actually learned quite a lot about the teams, and hopefully you have too. And yeah, if it ever pops up in a pop quiz, that's good rhyming. But if it ever pops up in a quiz, just make sure that you have these four clubs in your head, and maybe you might win. You might win something. But yeah, that's it for this show. If you liked it, please give a like, and please make sure to check out everything else on the Mars FM YouTube channel. And thank you everyone for listening, and I will see you next week. Goodbye.